Well, the mics and the cameras are back on, or laptops more than cameras. And my name is Jeffrey Davis. I'm host of Radio Entrepreneurs. Welcome back to the reformulated edition of Radio Entrepreneurs, where we're streaming stories every day about how entrepreneurs are coping with the new reality, going to business and working in business. You know, almost every entrepreneur I talk to is trying to figure out how to stay in business and how to get back into business in terms of rolling back in with work, more face-to-face contact. And we thought it would be important to bring back a guest we've had on before, Dr. David Shein, primary care physician at Wellesley Internal Medicine, to talk to us about how to deal with this roll back to work plan. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. I'm over 60. I don't know if I should have said that on the air. And I look at things a little bit differently than, let's say, my staff, that one's in his 30s and one's in his 40s, early 40s maybe. So why don't you talk to us about, what you think entrepreneurs should be thinking about right now as we get towards the governor's date and past Memorial Day?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the important thing to think about really is just business continuity. What's it going to take to continue your business? And, to the extent that many people are finding that working from home actually works, saving time on the commute, saving gas, no traffic, I think those are important considerations. So for folks for whom working from home works, or perhaps now they only need 1 or 2 days in the office instead of 5, I think another important consideration is going to be public transportation. I'm an advocate of public transportation. I think fossil fuel use from commuting, from traffic is harmful for people and for the environment. But you're certainly not going to want to be on a congested bus or train. So I think that's another important consideration just in terms of both the public health and the health of individuals. I think back in the office, there are going to be a lot of things to think about. I think masks are going to be important. This is a respiratory virus. It's going to change the way we literally look at and see each other. But I think we really have to think about the importance of mask policies. We see a range of folks. You go outside, some people are wearing masks on their bikes, on running. Other people are walking with no mask. I think masks are going to become very standard and an important part of life, at least for the foreseeable future. I think the social distancing is important. And I think to the extent that, you can maybe have people working, from home increasingly, you'll be able to achieve social distancing in the office. People won't be quite on top of each other as much as they've been in the past. Cleaning surfaces is important as well. I'm a big advocate of listening to our public health authorities, of listening to our governments. And, I think locally in Massachusetts, our governor is doing a tremendous job in looking at both for the public health as well as the, sort of the business interests and the individual needs of both the community and individuals. So I would advocate for staying with the government's plan, going along with a stepwise return to business as the governor's announced. And one other very important thing that I want to emphasize is the contact tracing that's been initiated in the state. One of the goals, obviously, is to find people who have the infection, to have the COVID-19 infection, and because it's transmitted through contact, is to find everyone who's been in touch with them or has contacted them and isolate them so that those people then don't transmit the virus. It turns out the virus is probably most transmittable in the very few days right up until people become symptomatic. So waiting until you get a fever or cough or lose your sense of taste or smell, the person's probably been transmitting virus at least for a day or two or maybe more. And so this contact tracing will take these people, identify them in advance of symptom development, and be able to get them to isolate. When the contact tracing people have been calling, it's an unrecognized number on the phone. About 50% of people have not been answering the phone. So, we are, and public health authorities are encouraging people just to answer your phone, even if it's an unknown number, because it could be the contact tracers trying to follow up from a potential exposure.
Interesting. Do you, in terms of the rolling back to work formula, do you look at it different in terms of age groups?
That's a very good question. There are a number of risk factors. So one certainly is age. There are stepwise increases as people get older, particularly for folks who are in their 70s and older. But even later 50s and 60s has been identified as a potential risk for a more complicated case of COVID. And requiring hospitalization or even what's called intubation or needing a breathing machine, a ventilator. Other risk factors include diabetes, even high blood pressure, hypertension, which affects about a third of Americans as a risk factor for a more serious case of COVID. So it's a very difficult question, actually, is to think about how to, sort of whether you should break down a working population into folks who are at higher risk. It turns out men are at higher risk as well than women. Yeah, so that's a tricky question. I think individuals are going to have to think this through, but I think ultimately, even younger people have been hospitalized and have had serious cases of COVID. And I think we really need to think about maintaining proper safety for your entire workforce. Even if there's someone who's at 1 or 2% risk of a complication, it's still probably not optimal to have them, back at work in a situation where there isn't, I'd say, optimal, sort of personal protection in place.
Well, again, there's so many statistics to go out, but it seems like I see a hockey stick when people are like over the age of 70. I know there's a curve up with 60, but over 70 and 80, they seem to be, and people who really are much more susceptible, that their immune systems aren't like, let's say, a Chris Gerald,
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no question. But again, but what I would say is that, even if the risk is super high for someone who's, say, 80, even if the risk is 2% for someone who's younger, is that an acceptable risk? And so I think we need to really make sure that our precautions are in place across the workforce. And again, there are other risk factors: high blood pressure, diabetes. 8-9% of the American population has diabetes, and some of those folks are younger. Obesity has been found to be a risk factor too. Unfortunately, that's fairly prevalent in our communities as well. So I would say, certainly if you have, employees who don't feel comfortable returning to work because of risk factors, to certainly work with them to accommodate that need and that concern, but really, to focus on your entire workforce, really on making sure everyone is in a situation that is as low risk as possible.
Right. Now, you're not just a primary care physician, because you do a lot of consulting with industries as well. So that's one of the reasons we like to have you on. Can you tell our listeners some of that work that you do as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work with primarily IT company, but in other areas as well. Basically, providing insight as a clinician, as a physician. I'm someone who's seeing patients, who's reading the medical literature, and anyone who's developing any medical technology, in particular around software. If you work in development, if you're a great computer programmer, you're probably a little bit less knowledgeable about what it means to take care of a patient. And so being able to, sort of take my medical skills and bring them to folks who are developing technology around healthcare, really I'm sort of your man on the ground who knows what healthcare delivery is like, and what providers are looking for, what patients are looking for, what makes sense from a medical or from a clinical perspective. When you translate your IT knowledge into something that's going to be deliverable to patients and in clinical settings, also with insurance companies and middle market in terms of healthcare providers.
So, as I watch other countries,
and also, yeah.
As I watch other countries opening up, and we see sort of a second sort of a wave, is there any advice you can give to some of our entrepreneurs in terms of, again, maybe a little redundant, opening up and not having a wave come in through one company or another?
Sure. So I think a few things. I think, number one is surveillance is going to be important. Being able to, so I know some folks are planning to reopen, are going to be taking temperatures every day of the folks walking into their office. So I think that would be important, is making sure that your employees understand, and everyone working with you, consulting with you, understands that you have both a firm policy, but also a permissive policy. I think traditionally people have been afraid, well, I'm sick, I'm going to power through, I'm going to go to work. There really needs to be both an understanding by employees, but also by the employer, that if people are sick, cut them a break. You don't need a doctor's note. If you're sick, don't come to work. If you have a fever, if you have a cough, if you have any suggested symptoms of COVID or any other transmissible illness, stay home. We'll make it work for you to stay home and be able to get your job done from there. So I think that's going to be critically important. And, I think if you are seeing a spike in infections or people in your workplace who are getting sick, to really do something to stem the tide. So have people stay home for another week or two. Make sure people are going to see their primary care physician to get follow-up on any potential symptoms they might be having. That's going to be something very important, that people are encouraged to go see their physicians and when appropriate, get tested. I'll just say that in terms of testing, early on, so just to take a side, detour here, there are really two types of tests for COVID-19. One is the swab test, which is actually testing for infection. The other one is the antibody test, which are testing for whether you've had the infection in the past. And the key thing I want to focus on is the actual infection test. Early on, there weren't enough tests available. And basically, they were trying to reserve the test for people who were very sick, going to the hospital, et cetera. Right now, in Massachusetts, we have access probably to enough testing. And so the goal would be to test pretty much everybody. Mild symptoms, you think you might have COVID, go ahead, test. Someone's been exposed and the public health tracing group wants you to be tested, go ahead, get tested. So we should be doing a lot more testing, and that would really help us understand the face of the pandemic at this point in our, locally in our state. So again, very low threshold to test. People should be reaching out either to their primary care physician and or going to testing places to get tested if they think they have symptoms. And the sooner we can pick up people who have COVID and know for sure it's COVID and it's not allergies or some other cause of, sort of cough, then it will be helpful in being able to curtail any potential surge that might occur or, uptick in the epidemic or the pandemic.
Interesting. Everybody, we've been speaking with Dr. David Shein, primary care physician, Wellesley Internal Medicine, also a consultant to industry on medical issues. David, if someone's looking for you, needs your advice, how would they find you?
WellesleyInternalMedicine.com is our website. If someone is interested in working with me on a consultant basis, it's a C Insight Health. So the letter C -Insight Health.com. And, feel free to reach out to me if anyone has any questions or concerns. I'd be happy to try to accommodate your needs.
Great. And we hope you come back again and keep us informed as everything starts to roll forward and we're learning more information. Thank you, David.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you very much. Have a great day. And everyone, please stay safe and, listen to the social distancing recommendations because they're very important.
Right. I only have one friend right now, my dog. So again, nice talking to you, David, and remind everybody this is Radio Entrepreneurs.